The number one composition currently in TFT is Piltover T-Hex on the 16.1c holiday patch. Riot buffed this dino right before they went on holiday break, and now it is absolutely terrorizing all of TFT. Dishsoap climbed the rank 1 with an absurd win rate, and his true opinion is that actually the only comp in S tier is Piltover T-Hex, and not some of the other stuff represented in the tier list. That's because Dishsoap thinks that comp is SS tier and the other comps are S tier, so it's all about relativity. All those comps are still really good. But the verdict is clear. If you're not playing this Piltover comp, you are behind the meta. So let's break down in this TFT Academy video how to play Piltover from every corner so that way you can gain infinite LP. Here are 3 tips to give you the edge playing Piltover currently on this patch compared to the other players. The first is to focus on Econ and pretty much Econ as your augment priority. If you look at the other compositions we have on the tier list, Yunara, Kindred, Tryndamere, you're going to see sometimes you prioritize items, sometimes you prioritize Econ, or maybe in some rare cases, some combat. But for this composition, you just want triple Econ if you can get that. And that's because the win condition in this composition is T-Hex at 2-star. If you can find a way to get 2-star T-Hex, it doesn't really matter you're lacking combat compared to the other compositions. You pretty much will wipe everything. And of course, if you get the Econ augments, that helps you unlock the T-Hex in the first place, which will help snowball. So Econ, Econ, Econ. If you're forced to take items in combat, some of those augments give you a little bit of Econ as well. You know, you're talking about like a big grab bag gives you 4 gold and some components. At least try to do something like that so you can compensate by, you know, getting some Econ, even if it's not a direct Econ augment. The second tip is that you don't want to actually end the game on 6 Piltover. You're going to a lot of times use 6 Piltover to get the mining drills. You can get gold. So that way, you know, going back to the first point, you can get to your 2-star T-Hex. If you end on 6 Piltover, it's largely because you actually aren't rich enough to transition to the 5 costs. So you're going to have to play around Superior Life Form or Echo Engine, whatever else that can help you be strong. But chances are that's like a top 4 Piltover play and not for a first place. And you might have to do that in some rare scenarios if you're not high rolling. And the third point is that the max cap of this board, even though it shows a bunch of 4 and 5 costs, it's actually another 2-star T-Hex. You're going to try to play it here in the corner pockets. Don't put T-Hex in the front. Don't put them in the back. Put them on usually B1 or B7. And if you have both of them, you can put it on both hexes. And unfortunately, you're going to have to cross the lasers, but it's going to be good so that way you can snipe both of the enemy carries in the corners. Here's how the typical progression of a Piltover game is going to go. You're pretty much going to sell everything at the beginning of the game outside of just Caitlyn and Caitlyn only. You don't even want to hold Vi's because Vi can cost you gold, and you only care about 2-star Vi anyways, so it doesn't really matter if you hold Vi early as long as you can get to 2-star Vi sometime by stage 3, and you should be rolling for enough times to hit a Vi 2. So you're going to be holding on to just Caitlyn, and you're going to be playing Bard, and trying to focus on making gold as soon as you can. I think that rolling on 2-2 is probably best practice because 2-2 maximize your chance of hitting Caitlyn at level 3, because at 2-3, if you roll for Bard, you have more Econ, but your odds are worse since you level to 4. So you could justify rolling at 2-2 a lot of times. If not, because you're really, really poor, maybe you hold, 5, 6 Caitlyns, just roll on 2-3. No big deal. From there, you're going to be adding Vi and Loris because this will unlock Orianna. And you just want as many chops to look at Orianna because you want to pick her up as you're rolling for Caitlyn. Chances are you're actually going to hit Orianna 2 on level 4 and 5, a pretty decent amount because you're just going to be rolling a lot. So if you get Orianna 2 for free, you can just play this board on level 5 and you'll be good to go. And then you just roll for this until you hit Caitlyn 3 and then you unlock the T-Hex. This is going to be your ideal core on level 5 and you're going to go IE and Guard Breaker onto Caitlyn. And then you're going to be stacking frontline item tanks on either Vi 2 or Loris, things like Bramble. Things like Crown Guard and Vow are also okay because you need to find ways to kill rods and tiers. You're going to be focusing pretty much on building Bis Dino, which we'll talk about later in this video. So just slam whatever frontline items you can and then worry about utility later. And if you do have extra items for whatever reason, let's say you're getting Drowning It, Orianna or Bard can hold things like Last Whisper, Morello, Red Buff, so on and so forth. If you're not hitting things like Loris or even the Orianna, the other board to play for is around Jarvan. Jarvan 3 is actually quite good in this composition because his ability grants all allies attack speed for 4 seconds, and that's actually really good for the T-Hex. So in a lot of situations, if you're rolling for 1 cost, going for Jarvan 3 is actually not bad, and if you hit Jarvan 3, then you keep them. But if you're on 6 Jarvans, don't overdo it. Just sell the extra Jarvans and push levels. And then from here, you have an extra long shot slot, so you can add in a Kog'Maw, for example, just because it's very cheap, or maybe even a Teemo, because Teemo is really good at dealing a bunch of small damage. And you can play something like this until you get to Caitlyn 3, but ultimately transition back to that Piltover board that we talked about. Once you unlock the T-Hex, and you're probably going to unlock it on level 5 or level 6, which looks weird, but it's going to be very strong. You're going to immediately have Caitlyn pilot the T-Hex, and you're going to move items to the T-Hex immediately. And then you're going to start stacking utility items on your back liners. Things like Last Whisper, Red Buff, Morello onto Orianna. In this situation, you have 5 Piltover, so look for Seraphine as soon as you can. Definitely hold any Seraphine extra, just 1 copy of it. So that way you can activate 6 Piltover as soon as you can and get the drill online. If you don't get the drill, there's going to be other mods that you can take. We'll talk about that later in this video. Until you hit Seraphine, just play another Warden as the frontliner. So a cheap Warden, for example, is Nautilus. And you can even take out Orianna because you're going to want to keep Bard in for econ purposes and just replace it with any gunslinger whatsoever. So you can put a Tristana. If you find a Misfortune is also good. And yes, you might even notice that if you actually have the Ionia, you can actually squeeze an Ionia here with Jin, with Xin Zhao, and just this Jarvan can come out for literally whoever. I mean, ideally, synergy-wise, you can go for Kennen, but you're not going to unlock Kennen very easily. But you could play this and get a little bit of free Ionia resources to also push levels. Once you get to level 8, the hardest part about this is finding a way to get to level 9 without having to roll too much. You might want to use some of your free rerolls from Bard to get to 2-star Braum or a 2-star Taric or a 2-star Skarner. Ideally, you can play around any of these, maybe even all of them. Let's say you're in a situation where you have so many econ augments that you don't really need 6 Piltover and you're at 1 life. So you want to make sure that you're strong. You can cut, both of these units, play Bard, or maybe cut the Bard in this instance if you're at 1 life, and just play good front line because the T-Hex should be strong enough. In fact, actually, if you're at 1 life, you definitely want to cut because you're not going to have enough units here. So you're going to cut Bard. This is an example of how you would play your best level 8 board because you just don't think you're going to get to 9 and just try to play for 4 Piltover plus strength. But you do have some other flexible options as well. If you're not hitting Skarner and Taric, let's say you high roll an Azir. Azir actually provides you the 2 Sand Soldiers for frontline, and that ties in with Seraphine. And this actually is good enough for 4 Piltover plus some frontline. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's actually 7 units. So you actually can just squeeze in something like the Taric here, right? And now all of a sudden you feel like way safer because you actually have some utility from Seraphine and Azir. And this also is really good too because sometimes you just get hit with nonstop rods, right? You get hit with rod. And you're like, oh my god, I can't do anything for DX. Now you actually have holders in the Seraphine and Azir, and you can have them be some of those item holders as well. Ultimately, though, the best cap is going to be around these following units. You're going to run Ornn because Ornn is a Warden that ties in with Loras and can farm you really powerful artifacts, which we'll talk about. You're also going to want Fiddlesticks and Shyvana because these are just some of the highest value 5 costs in the game. And then you're going to ultimately want a second T-Hex like we talked about. And then, you can do some really fun stuff like T-Hex eats both an Orianna 3 and a Caitlyn 3. And this is max cap. Like if you can get to this board, this is going to be Senna. If you can get to this board, you will win, I think, something like 80 to 90% of your games minimum. And the only thing that can stop you is stuff like 3-star 5 costs. Here's the unit tier list for Piltover. The top row are the units that are basically what makes this composition really good. The first is that you really want Caitlyn 3, and that's because Hexmech as an ability, if we can actually look at the team builder, Hexmech says whatever unit you consume, their role type is what gives you the stats. And specifically what we're looking for is a caster, because if you get a caster, you get mana regen, which is really powerful. If you can get to a 3-star, for every star level you get increased stats, and it goes from 3 to 6 to 12, and that's more than 2 blue buffs putting on T-Hex. It's more powerful than a rating item. And so that allows us to build all offensive items onto the T-Hex, which we'll talk about items right after this. So Caitlyn's really, really powerful specifically because she helps you unlock the T-Hex by getting star level, and specifically she is the pilot. You can also play for a 3-star Orianna. I guess I could put 3-star Orianna, high up here, like 3-star here, but you realistically aren't going to get to Orianna 3 a lot of games, but that is an alternative you can do. Loras is pretty much your only frontliner for Piltover, so you're going to have to play him because Vi actually gets out of the game later since she doesn't do enough. She's more of a fighter carry, but Loras is the actual tank, and he has some pretty good CC. Of course, T-Hex, maybe you probably should put T-Hex at the very top because he's very important. Lucian Senna is the best gunslinger to tag onto the T-Hex. You might think it's all about the laser, but the gunslinger is also pretty important for the T-Hex. And then Bard, of course, is going to be your main engine to get to this. As Bard is the entire reason why this composition can even function in the first place from pretty much any spot. The A tier units are the best late game units that you can play on average, assuming you're not just hitting a second T-Hex, which, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and put a second T-Hex so you can drive home the point that we want double T-Hex. Ornn is really good because it ties in as a Warden with Loris. You're going to be winning a lot of fights, so you can get to the first Blacksmith activation. And T-Hex is really good with a bunch of artifacts, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. So Ornn is actually one of the units you can actually take off Carousel if you already unlocked the T-Hex, because you should be able to get at least one artifact, and that artifact can be game-winning in itself. Fiddlesticks is just really powerful because of the CC, and Fiddlesticks is just one of the most splashable units in the game. Same thing with Shyvana. She's really powerful and gives you durability, which is nice because sometimes the T-Hex is a little bit fragile since you're building a glass cannon build. And then you have two of the most flexible tanks in the game, Skarner and Taric. Skarner's just really good right now in this current patch because there's so much physical damage, and the passive gives you a bunch of armor. And then Taric is the inverse of that, gives you a bunch of resistances, and he's just also quite a solid tank himself. B tier is like the stuff that's pretty solid, especially for its cost. Braum is oftentimes what you play if you don't hit Ornn because you need 2 Warden. And if you get Braum 2 is definitely better than Loris 2. Vi is only kept late game if you somehow hit Jarvan 3. And Jarvan 3 gives attack speed for the whole team, which is really good for the T-Hex, plus the Gunslinger effect. So if you have Jarvan 3, you can keep Jarvan 3 and the end game with Vi, and you play that as your 4th Piltover. Because you might notice that there's only 3 Piltovers. There's Caitlyn, Gunslinger, and the Loris. And you need to pick one of these 3, which is Vi, Orianna, and Seraphine. You play Vi if you have Jarvan 3. Orianna is just a utility item holder because sometimes you don't hit Lucian Senna, you don't hit the Misfortune, you don't have any Gunslinger activate. You need someone to hold things like the Last Whisper, the Red Buff, the Morello, things like that. Orianna holds that from the back line right behind the T-Hex. And then Nautilus is just a cheap Warden that also ties into Shyvana just to make a temporary board. The C tier is the stuff that you can play, and this is sort of depending on your items / what you're rolling. Sometimes you just don't hit the 5 costs that you want. So if you hit Azir is frontline plus ties in with Seraphine and good AP item holder. Zillion's also an Invoker that ties in with Orianna. So if you get, a bunch of tiers and rods and you just can't put on the T-Hex, can't put on frontline, just give items to Zillion. Plus, he gives you some EXP with Chrono Keeper to help you level to 9 and get to the TX2. And then Misfortune is a Gunslinger that substitutes for Lucian if you had the slot. And you know what? This is you probably shouldn't just play this Jarvan. This is Jarvan 2. Just don't play Jarvan 2. If you're Jarvan 2, just sell him. So let's go ahead and remove that from the tier list. This is the item tier list for Piltover as well. The 2 most important items for the T-Hex pretty much every game is Infinity Edge and Striker's Flail. You want this combo. Even if you don't have the Striker's Flail in the early mid game, you will try to get it for the late game. Like you see it off a carousel, take it off carousel, save run remover, remove it, put it on the dino, things like that. Because maxing the crit is just so important to burst the back line. The S tier line is the best 3rd items that you can play on average. The first is Deathblade. The problem with Deathblade is you need 3 swords, so it's pretty impractical to get there sometimes. But, in rare scenarios, you're able to get double swords or maybe even off a late game carousel. A second Striker's Flail is good, so you can go IE, Flail, and that's also good to continue to lean into the crit. And Gunblade ends up being very good for this composition because your front line can be fragile at times, especially if you only have Loris 2 and 1-star Wardens. So Gunblade can be good for the T-Hex. Since you deal so much damage, it'll burst heal your front line and sustain them for a long time. It also has some good synergies with some other Piltover mods, which we'll talk about right after this. In the A tier, I would say Hodge, Quicksilver are fine items for the Dino because they are glove items. So you notice that they give a little bit of crit, a little bit of Omnivamp, a little bit of stats. This gives you CC immunity, which is really nice since the Dino might get stunned by other things like a Skarner or a Swain. So nice things, but it's a little bit on the defensive side, and we want to go all offense. So they're not best in slot, but they're pretty solid. And then one item I think is underrated is Sterix Gauge because it just gives you a ton of AD and a bunch of survivability, which may help you get a second cast. So it's nice in a pinch scenario. B tier are just situational items that you can play for depending on your items. Sometimes you just get dropped tier and you have nothing else to do. You just make blue buff, just put blue buff on the Dino. It's okay. And then late game, you remove that blue buff, put on someone else, put on Lucian Senna. Same thing with red buff, right? You want to play 3-item Dino just because the guide recommends that we have, red buff and Last Whisper and Shojin on the Senna. If you have T-Hex with IE and Flail, don't put the red buff on your Seraphine or your Orianna or your Lucian Senna. Put the 3rd item on T-Hex. And that's kind of what the B tier is. You could play it for a little bit of time. Try not to go for more than half a stage because you should be able to get another item with some of these items. And the last two rows are the artifact tiers that are really good on the T-Hex in particular. The top ones are the 4 best, and then these ones are okay. Gold Collector is insane. Silvermere Dawn's insane. Fishbone's insane. Mitten's insane. All these are very, very, very good. You want to pick them off of Portable Forge if you're forced to pick that for some reason, or if you get it off of Orn artifacts. And these are also really solid, but they're not going to be single-handed you win the game compared to the ones above it. Any other artifact that you get is most likely going to go on Orn, or if you get something that's very good for an AP carry, such as, you know, Dawn Core on Seraphine, you could play Dawn Core on Seraphine, but chances are you just want more frontline because Dino is so much damage that as long as you stall for the Dino, it's going to be good enough. One of our TFT Academy writers, Soulless, did a tier list for our Piltover modules, and we pretty much agree. There's a couple of small caveats to it. Solo Gasong also did his own tier list, which we also kind of stand behind as well. For the most part, I think everyone agrees on it, so let's go ahead and break it down. The best 2 Piltover modules are Electrical Overload and Blast Shield. Electrical Overload just gives you damage, and you're trying to be a burst comp, so in general, just try to take things that help you burst. And Blast Shield is basically just exiles on your whole team without having to position on exiles. It's very, very good. It's also good in just non-T-Hex compositions whenever you're playing Piltover. I think most people know that these are the 2 best, and you pretty much lean into that no matter what. If you're forced to pick some of these others, I probably go EMP over Caliber Nets, just because Caliber Nets is really good early game, and it's not something that has a lot of impact late game, but EMP still can have impact late game, even though it's not ideal. For Piltover modules, I personally prefer Magnetron Coil over Gigantic Ray because, well, you guessed it, Magnetron Coil does more damage, and we want to burst. But the thing about Gigantic Ray is that it actually has a lot of combos with 6 Piltover modules, and that's why Solus actually placed it really, really high. He puts Gigantic Ray actually in S tier as well, and that's for low roll mitigation. So you might want to take Gigantic Ray if you sense yourself going down really low, you're not hitting the TX too super fast, and you don't think that you're going to be able to play around Mining Drill very often. And then the other option to take if you don't get any of those is Micro Rockets. And then 6 Piltover modules, the best is Mining Drill because you're pretty much just going to farm, what, 6 to 7 gold a round. Sometimes if you low roll a little bit less, but on average, you should be getting an insane amount of gold every single round. And then Superior Life Form is really good because it summons a copy of your T-Hex. 2 T-Hexes is better than 1. We talked about that crossing laser stuff. And then Echo Engine has pretty decent synergy with things like Gigantic Ray. So there is a little bit of tech there, but you're not looking to pick Echo Engine unless you get offered literally these 3, like Upgrade, Echo Engine, and Armor Nullifier. Only pick it if you feel like you don't have anything else better to pick. Here's my Piltover Augment tier list for pretty much all the econ augments that I would consider. There might be a couple missing, but if so, just use some of the stuff that we talked about here to drive the general heuristics and rules that you would navigate through the game yourself. S tier is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll talk about any that might be specific exceptions. Fire Cell just gives you so much gold every round. Misconnections gives you things like the Caitlyn. Honor Roll is extremely broken. In fact, I actually put this as number 1 because I just think it's so powerful to farm the T-Hex. If you get Honor Roll going, I've actually seen it unlock as early as 3-2 with the T-Hex. It's that busted. Definitely give it a try, especially with Bard. Patience of Virtue unlocks Bard plus free rerolls. Rolling for Days also gives you free rerolls, so it's just all really powerful econ. Epoch gives you Bard. Stars Are Born gives you 2 stars. Construct a Champion gives you instant 3-star Caitlyn. You can push levels and a little bit of gold. Trade Sector unlocks Bard. Hexgate Travel actually gives you a rare scenario where you can go for both Caitlyn 3 and Orianna 3, and that's really powerful because Orianna 3 and Caitlyn 3 can both pilot the 2 T-Hexes that you're aiming for late game, so this gives you max cap of double 3-star Hex Mech. Indecision just gives you Econ plus the chance of getting another Econ Augment. That also applies to Indecision too. Prismatic Ticket is also the best Prismatic that you can open up for this game, and then Call of the Chaos has, well, I mean, it's just an insane amount of Econ if you get it. Whether it's free rerolls or a bunch of gold or a bunch of EXP. A-tier augments, good for something, is helpful, especially if you're rolling for Bard early, helps you make all your econ intervals and just really solid. Late game specials helps you get to 9, and that should be picked when you have a good chance of getting there. 1 through 3 also has a chance of just high rolling really hard, give you things like Dolores, gives you things like Vi, and just gives you econ to immediately roll for Bard. Care Package is really strong. It gives you things like items, econs, reforgers, just a very, very versatile thing. In fact, I think this probably goes to the S tier, personally, now that I'm looking at it. Advanced Loan can be really good. The only problem is that if you're missing out on a prismatic econ, but if you advance loan into a silver, that's perfectly fine. So it's risky, and that's why it's not S tier. Hero Grab Bag is generally good. I actually think all versions of Hero Grab Bag are pretty solid, depending on your spot. Malicious Monetization is really good. You should be winning on 4-2 if you have the Dino to help you farm up. Reinforcement is mainly used on tank. Don't use it on Seraphine unless you absolutely need it to unlock the T-Hex. I use it for Terex, Garner, and Braum. Explosive Growth, Tiniest Titan, Growth Mindset, and Hedge Fund are all just heavy econ augments to help you get to 9. And Expected Unexpectedness is really good because it can give you gold. It also can give you duplicators at the beginning of 3-1 very often. Pandora's Bench sounds pretty good in theory, but the problem with Pandora's Bench is that you're oftentimes going to use bench to roll Caitlyn and only Caitlyn, which gives you a lot fewer hits. Iron Assets also is just one of those things that helps fix your items, a little bit of gold, but it's okay. It's not that insane. And then that's the same thing with Placebo. It just helps you get gold. Team building is pretty slow, but I would only take it at the beginning of the game, not at 3-2. Titanic Titan is also just a way to get extra HP and maybe help you get a little bit of carousel priority. I like exclusive customization. This is pretty much the bar of I'm not taking a direct econ augment. What's the next best option? I think this helps you simultaneously fix your items for the situation where you get dropped a bunch of tiers and rods, as well as get a little bit of 10 gold. It ends up being pretty solid. Hard Bargain is only good if you have good items already. If you have an Infinity Edge or things that you feel like can get you to Infinity Edge, I'd probably click Hard Bargain, but the problem is you will likely get item screwed if you take this. Gain 21 gold is also pretty solid. Quite frankly, I actually think this probably goes in A tier just because you need the econ, so I'm going to move it up right now. 3-3s is also decent. It surprisingly can clutch a ton of situations with the upgrades themselves. There's been times where it gives me like a Nautilus 2 and the gold that I need, so I have some frontline and I can stabilize. But in a lot of situations, it's just pretty much just gold. Big Grab Bag is just to help you fix your items, and it gives you 2 gold. Same thing with Invested and Commerce Core. These are all just like pin situations to help you get econ going. Risky moves, you're just going to lose a lot early game. So a lot of times I've actually started the game at, 20 life. So risky moves would actually kill me if that's the case. But if you can find a way to navigate around that, it might actually be worth. Efficient Shopper is pretty cute because you can get double Loris, you can get double Vise, you can even get double Caitlyn's off carousel, but it's not actually that good. So, it's here, it's conditional. Sometimes it's like literally your only econ augment. Lunge Money, every 7 damage you deal to enemy tacticians give you 2 gold. Only if you really feel like you're high rolling and you can actually leverage this by having an early T-Hex unlock. For example, you get honor roll into Lunge Money, it could do that. 1-2-5, if you unlock the T-Hex in a pinch situation, might give you a random 5 cost, aka a T-Hex. Savings account, you're not often going to be able to activate this pretty consistently very early on, but in high econ situations like a Scuttle Puddle with a gold opener, you might be able to do it. Hustler messes with your econ intervals, but it does give you the option of rolling early for things like Caitlyn every single turn, unlocking Bard, and maybe using Bard to unlock the rest. So something to think about. Max build and 1 buff, 2 buff are pretty much situations where you feel like you have to roll for 2-star Dino on 8. And that might sound crazy, but it actually happens pretty often whenever I play it, get, a Dino pair. So if you can find a way to duplicate and get 2-star T-Hex on level 8, these would be clutch. These EXP augments, like Patient Study, Slammin', and Cluttered Mind, all just reduce your chances of hitting. So I personally would not favor them, but sometimes you're going to be, taking things like Patient Study, Slammin', and then finding yourself in a Piltover spot. They are okay if they help you get to the T-Hex. Pilfer is pretty bad as an econ augment because you're not going to be killing a lot of units. But if you are win streak Piltover, you can consider it. Treasure Hunt is also something that you actually aren't going to be rerolling a lot once you get to stage 4. So you're not going to actually activate this outside of stage 2 and stage 3, which is not exactly the most consistent. But some of the Treasure Hunt cash outs are really, really good for this comp. So might be something you're worth considering. Let's do some Dishsoap gameplay to try and demonstrate how to navigate through a Piltover spot. And we're going to be playing on 2x because it's pretty straightforward once you get everything in motion, and you'll just see how smooth everything is once you get to the T-Hex unlock. The portal is Draven Reckon Arena, so as players die, you're going to get more gold, which is good for pushing levels in the later stage of the game. Right now, you can see at the beginning of the game, he only has Leona because he's thinking about things like Diana, but he doesn't actually have any Piltover units. So this is a Piltover game where he started with 0 Piltover units. So hopefully that will show you how powerful it can be. First augment is an item. It's not econ. Woven Magic is not econ. Treasure Hunt is kind of econ, but I like it a lot better on an econ start. That being said, out of all of these, I think that Treasure Hunt would be the pick for Piltover if you were forced to. Gold Destiny is one of those augments where you think, oh, it could be anything. It could be 3 gold plus the econ augment I want. But Stars Are Born is pretty much perfect because it gives you 2-star Caitlyn and the 2-star Vi and it just accelerates your game plan super fast. So this is one of the S tier augments we talked about. Definitely click it and move on. Don't get tempted by Gold Destiny. It's bait, I promise you. Dishsoap actually scouts really quickly before committing to it just to make sure that he's uncontested, and he sells everything to make 20. Oh, actually, just kidding. This person actually has Stars Are Born and also is going for Caitlyn, so he is contested. So that's actually good because this will show you a demonstration of a game of what to do when you are contested, since I anticipate this comp to be a lot more popular in the coming days, if not already. He's going to roll here on 2-2 for maximum odds, and he actually hits the Caitlyn 2 and the Vi 2, and he has Bard. And he is going to be stronger than a lot of these boards that are trying to lose streak playing around Bard. They're trying to play open for it, but that's okay because Bard should be printing 1 costs if it tailors to your board. So Bard will probably give him a 1 cost, but there's a chance that's a Caitlyn if it is a 1 cost. But it's important to note because if he was playing this Jarvan on the board as well, I think he has a chance to give him Jarvan or the Caitlyn. But he misses, so it is what it is, and that's fine. That's why he's playing this 2-cost Nico instead. We're going to fast forward a little bit and try to get to the carousel because he's going to be looking for an Infinity Edge. You can see that he didn't slam Last Whisper, for example. Fortunately, there were 2 swords on the carousel, so he was able to get the sword immediately. Makes the Infinity Edge immediately onto the Caitlyn. He's at 4 Caitlyns right now. Bard is printing the +1 gold. Finally loses 1 fight because he's going up against level 5 boards. He was getting free wins because other people are open for it, but notice that he's not trying to sell everything in 5 loss. He's just playing Bard for steady econ, selling things that he doesn't need, like a Nico. Doesn't really matter for the composition, so he sells a Nico to make 40. And then he loses his last fight, stage 2, to get the free rerolls, and is ready to start rolling next turn. At 3-1, Dishsoap is going to roll probably to 50 here. I think a lot of times players would feel tempted to roll to like 30, but I think he actually has to stop at 50 because he's going to be slow rolling a lot this stage, and you're not going to just be rolling for Caitlyn. You're also rolling for things like Orianna and Loris. He's going to make an adaptive because those are just components that he doesn't want onto the Dino at all, so that can be decent now as well as a tank item later. Adaptive is very flexible. 3-2 Augment, not econ, not econ, not econ. I'm down to roll all of them. Oh, wow. He actually gets honor roll, but it's a little bit late for honor roll. This is much better at 2-1 than it is on 3-2, but missed connections is exactly what he's looking for. It's a silver augment that gives him a copy of all the 1 costs, which is huge. Now, the thing about missed connections is you actually want to not pick up the orbs until you have 1 off of Caitlyn 3. And that's because if you pull this Caitlyn out of the orb, then you pull 1 Caitlyn out of the pool. And so the min-max play is to just not pick up the Caitlyn, and that's exactly what Dishsoap's doing. Caitlyn's bottom center for reference, so he's keeping that last Caitlyn in the orb and going to be picking that up only when he is at 8 Caitlyns. Loses another fight, gets free rerolls, he's going to roll, he's 1 off Caitlyn, finds the 8th Caitlyn, makes Caitlyn 3, and now he's missing Loris and Orianna. He's going to level to 6 and roll on 6 for the Orianna and the Loris. Roll on 6 because it's too much gold to go to 7, and also because the odds for 3 costs are pretty decent on 6. It's 25%, so you're likely to hit it. On Carousel, it picks up gloves, so that way he can get the Striker's Flail started, even though he doesn't have it finished. Getting that glove is good, plus it's 4 gold on Lysandra. And the rest of the stage goes pretty mediocre for Dishsoap. He loses 1, wins 1. He's still not at Dino, so I wouldn't define this game as high rolling by any means. In fact, Dishsoap actually pre-leveled to 7 here to probably roll to see if he can hit a Seraphine as well. And he's going to roll very, very deep and finally gets to the 2-star Loris. The level of 7 here is actually because he was low rolling and he's contested. He needs to find alternative ways to get to the Piltover breakpoint. So he rolled for that Seraphine. That's a rare instance. In a lot of cases, you're going to want to roll on 6 for this if you're uncontested. He gets the items and he can immediately transfer it over. He can actually put all 3 items onto the Dino like we talked about. It doesn't matter if you don't have best in slot. Just put the 3 items onto the T-Hex and slam your frontline items. He ends up slamming Crown Guard. He had the opportunity to slam a Stone Plate, which is a little bit of a better defensive item, and unlock Skarner, but I think he wants the bow and the cloak for utility items. In his mind, this bow could be Last Whisper or Red Buff, and in his mind, this cloak could be Even Shroud, and he needs to have some of those utility items to finish his composition. And finally, we're at the last augment, and then we're going to pretty much just zoom past all of this. Not econ, econ, not econ. So explosive growth is pretty much the clear pick here unless he wants to roll for something else. He actually does roll other econ. Heroic Grab Bag is something that you would take in this instance if he didn't hit the Dino by now. He hit it the previous turn, but imagine if he didn't have Loris 2 and didn't have Orianna 2. You would take this Heroic Grab Bag, finish that, and then get the Dino online plus the 14 gold. Exclusive customization is also a reasonable pick if he didn't have explosive growth, because exclusive customization could give him the missing item that he has on Dino. Let's say you get dropped Vest, Cloak, Rod, Tier, no swords, no gloves, nothing of that sort. You could take exclusive customization here, try to go for a 3rd Dino item, and try to catch up that way. So he actually takes exclusive customization, and lo and behold, he actually gets a third item for the dino. He actually takes a Hodge off of this, which I don't really mean to criticize Dishsoap, but I do think that that is slightly suboptimal, at least according to the stats. And just to bring it up to, because he's the world champion, so you want to fact check that. But if you have Infinity Edge and Striker's Flail on the dino, Hodge seems to perform a lot worse than the second Striker's Flail. It's rare to get the second Striker's Flail, but this is an instance where you would actually favor that. It could be context dependent on his Piltover mods. It also could be context dependent on the lobby, so not a strict mistake, but according to the stats, you want to go for a second Striker's Flail there. And to be fair, this is a VOD from 2 to 3 days ago, which is kind of a lifetime in TFT. It could also be that he himself would agree now that he has seen the play and the meta has developed a little bit with more stats. So just keep that in mind. And one of those things where maybe Hodge can be correct, but a lot of times the stats would say Striker's Flail number 2 would be better. Off the carousel, Dishsoap gets another glove, so he can go for Last Whisper and get his utility. He actually doesn't get any of the Omega 6 Piltovers like the Piltover Drill to get the gold, so he has to take a combat one here. And it looks like he just takes Upgrade. I think he's pretty unhappy about all these things. A lot of people would take Echo Engine in particular. He's going against the Mirror, so he's another person that has a dino, but he's able to beat them. And now Dishsoap is off to the races. It's interesting to note that this Piltover player, by the way, took items and crash test on me. So this person's capability of getting 9 is going to be a little bit slower, but he has more HP. So he could probably trade that HP. And that's a dino on 8. So now he has dino pair. Going back to what I said on the augment section, this is something that actually happens semi-regularly. This guy's playing Azel, by the way. And you should be able to use that duplicator to get a dino 2. And that helps you also accelerate. We're going to fast forward here to level 9 where he completes his dino 2, gets his upgrades with Braum, and you can pretty much just see the game is just on rails. He does high roll a couple of things. Like I think he got his dino 2 pretty early. Braum is also pretty fast to hit. Has the Orn as well to start farming the blacksmith items as well. But Dishsoap pretty much is in clear. The worst he's going to place this game is second, I think, unless someone hits like a crazy high roll. Now you can start holding on to... Darkest Staff is not bad, actually. You can just put that on somebody. Okay, he reforges to Triforce. That's also perfectly fine. It's one of the good ones. Okay, just going to put that on Orn. That's always something you can do safe as well, because I think part of the reason why he put the artifact on Orn is that he doesn't have a good holder of the Hand of Justice. So he's like downgrading... He's upgrading his dino with the Infinity Force, but the Hand of Justice is dead. So I think at least that gives him some usage there. He's going up against a Vayne 3. Vayne 3 actually is one of the compositions that has a DPS to take down the Dinosaur 2, because Vayne 3 is insane, especially with this build. Heavy as the Crown, Kraken, Gunblade. It's True Bis. So he loses, but that's okay. He's at 80 gold going to level 10. He's the fact that he's win streaking even this much while greeting is really good. And now we push a 10 and roll for all the 2 stars and hopefully win the game, because we're going to get things like Senna. The Piltover can finally come out and we can play higher quality units and finally transition our board, because Seraphine is just not that good here. Also, one thing to note that I haven't actually talked about is notice how he's still playing Bard, right? He's still playing Bard even all the way to level 10. Stage 6 Bard finally sells it. Bard is that good. Transitions his items over to Senna, gets his item anti-heal. So now all of his utility is done. This adaptive is basically a Shojin. So he has Shojin, GS, and Last Whisper, and that should be all she wrote. Very nice and easy, comfortable first place. And hey, look, the other Dino player, the other TX player also top 4. So even if you're contested, you both can top 4. That's how broken this comp is, I think. All right. Well, he makes the Fiddlesticks 2 on the bench. He's still keeping 6 Piltover, but I think he is infinitely stronger now. He even played the Azir for frontline. This is the rematch versus the Vayne player. Not even close, and that is the game. Well done, Dishsoap. So there you have it. All of our tech on Piltover T-Hex. Definitely play it if you get those econ starts and hold every Caitlyn you possibly can for the early stages of the game. Hope you're gaining infinite LP this holiday break. Have a great rest of the new year, and I'll see you guys next time.